Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Timist Podcast Series. My name is James, and I am the Timist and the host of the thing you're currently listening to. Today, I'm joined by musician, songwriter, and passionate watch enthusiast James McVey. We explore how watches found their way into James's world not just as accessories, but as meaningful storytellers. James opens up about his journey from being outside the watch world to becoming one of its most open and enthusiastic collectors. We also talk about the timepieces that bridge generations, the beauty of his unique Bel Canto, and whether a future guitar-infused piece unique might be on the horizon. Not only that, but we also get his take on Christopher Ward's new Loco, tour watch essentials, and explore the idea of being stewards of our watches for future wearers. But still, we go even deeper than just horology. We talk about the role of mentors, how his parents supported his early music career, the pressures of life on tour, and how mental health and creativity are so tightly interwoven. All this and so much more. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack as we get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Timist Podcast Series. I'm very excited to welcome my very first veritable pop star on the podcast. Hailing from England, he founded the international pop rock band that is the Vamps, topping the charts with 2 number 1 albums, 5 top 10 singles, and over 6 billion streams. His brotherhood of bandmates made history, becoming the first to headline London's O2 Arena for 5 consecutive years. He's a vocalist, singer, songwriter, guitarist, and a genuine watch nerd. Plus, he's a really nice guy. I, of course, am talking about the creative talent that is James McVey. James, welcome. How are you today?
Thanks, man. Yeah, what a lovely intro. It's funny when you said those accolades, which I'm very fortunate to have achieved. I always think, well, God, if I was into watches a little bit younger, then some of the things I could have picked up back then, on that O2 Arena kind of tour. Oh, I could have had my annual calendar by now, but no, I put it into this apartment, which is good, but it's not an annual calendar, is it? But I'm good, thanks, man. How are you?
I'm great. I'm talking to you, so it's a great day. Listen, don't say that. I mean, yes, it's hindsight is 2020, but obviously I think most people would argue that you made the right choice.
I think so. I do think so. Yeah, yeah. I could have had like a rainbow Daytona though. And like when you're thinking about that kind of world, I don't know if I made the right choice, man. Would
But
you
it's a
rather live in an apartment with no rainbow Daytona or not having it's a hard, or live in your car and have a rainbow Daytona? I don't know, man. I'm joking. I'm absolutely yes. I did make the right decision. I'm not even sure if I really like rainbow Daytonas. And I tried it on with Andrew Morgan actually the other week. And I don't know if anyone else has ever had this. If you get hands on with watches like that, so they had that on. Then they also had the GMT that's got the gem set. Like GMT Master 2 with the gem set bezel, and I can't remember if it was like Pavé d'Al as well. But anyway, I had like a desire to eat it because it looked like sweets, like that gradient of color on the rainbow, and then on the GMT, I was like, I've never had that sensation for a watch before, and I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing. I don't know if I'm viewing it as something as insignificant as a bag of sweets, or if I love it so much that I want it to be inside me. And you can take that for whatever you think.
We'll just leave it at that, and then folks can just kind of extrapolate that however they feel like it. Interesting. I've never felt the sensation or desire to eat a watch so far, but I can see it. I could totally see it.
You
So
will.
give it time. James, listen, I need you to know that I am also melodically inclined. Before we go any deeper, into this conversation, I play the accordion. In fact,
Really?
I do. But honestly, jokes aside, it's something that I hold truly very near and dear to my heart. It's something that my grandfather sort of blessed me with, and that is the love of music. So we're both men of music and of watches. I may not be as appreciated or internationally known or even recognized for that matter as you, but just know
I know
that I play the accordion. Okay.
that's good. I don't think I've ever met anyone that's what whenever I hear like accordion or like harpsichord or something like that, I always see that like when I've met someone that plays that, it's always like, oh, I play guitar, but I also play this. So it's great that your passion is accordion. Like I love that, man. I could do with some of that on some of my music. So I might have
let's
to hit
let's
you up at
yeah,
some
yeah,
point.
let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is how my musical career starts.
Here we go. And ends.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. But we'll see. We'll see. Time will tell, I guess. But
Yeah.
you've taken the proverbial airwaves in the last couple of years by storm, honestly. Your watch journey has been something that I've been following over the years, and I love your like state of the collection updates. Well done on those. Thank you for doing them. I think people are asking for the
Cheers.
third one.
Yeah, well, no, so the thing is, I do them kind of, there's that period of the year, which is, I guess, some people are getting really cheeky with it and start pushing them out in like October. I'm like, nah, it should be at the end of the year. So from
Mm.
sort of mid-November on, they start cropping up. So I try and do one at the end of the year. But I'm slightly worried that this year's one isn't going to be too exciting. But then again, last year I had the same thought at this point, and then by the end of the year, I think I'd had maybe six things in and a couple things out, and actually already this week, I sold my first ever watch and then bought something else. And for me, that was something I thought I would never do. Like that where the journey began and all this stuff. And something just clicked, and I don't know what it was. And I was like, I don't wear it as much as I should. I just find the watch it. So it was a 2017 sub date,
Hmm.
which is a pretty, I was very fortunate to be able to afford that as my first watch. It was kind of just before, I mean, I picked it up in, well, yeah, 2017,
Oh
just
yeah.
so before the pandemic. I mean, it was a lot of money, and relatively speaking, uh, how old would I have been? I don't know, sort of mid 20s, and spending that sort of money on anything that's not brick and mortar was silly. But I got the sub, and I toured with it around the world for like 2 years, and it was kind of again before I'd only really been in London a few years. The whole watch crime thing wasn't quite as prolific as it is now. So I wore this watch to death on the bracelet, like oyster bracelet, around the world, and that would be anywhere from walking through like Mexico City at night, like on my own, uh, through to Tokyo to or India. Did music videos in India, everywhere with this Submariner. But for some reason, I guess it's probably a combination of it just really being crazy nowadays. I know that you get these people in some of these WhatsApp groups that are like, oh, you can wear whatever you want, wherever, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, man, like, I get it, I rate it, but I don't even want the risk of that. So
Yeah.
it's funny. I'll wear my 1803. I know you don't love references. That's a 36 mil day date. I'll wear
Thank you.
that. It's on a leather strap, and people don't know, but this really people don't really give it much attention. But there's something about oyster bracelet, well, diver watch in general. That in London is kind of crazy, and I realized it had been sat in the safe for a long time, and I'd even put it on a commando strap, which I
Hmm.
loved. Tried it on different NATOs. I even put it on a leather, which I know is a bit divisive to put a dive watch on a leather strap. But basically, I chopped and changed it up to try and make it work in my kind of life. And I realized the only time I would wear it would be when I'd go back to my parents on the South Coast. And I'm like, yes, it was my first watch, but I didn't buy it from new. There was no real sentimental attachment to it because I initially wanted an Explorer 2, but I just couldn't find it was before I had any sense. I had no relationship with any ADs. I didn't even know what an AD was.
Hmm.
There was no one that I knew that was selling an Explorer 2. So I kind of settled for the sub. And then I realized actually, would I buy a Submariner now? Because I feel like with our watch collecting, we go through phases, right? We learn, we grow, we evolve, we make mistakes, continuously make mistakes, and then our tastes kind of curated as we get older and experience different things. And I've got a real pull towards vintage now, and I have which sounds quite sad, but quite an emotional attachment to anything that's particularly old. And I thought a few days ago, would I buy this Submariner now? If
Hmm.
I had the money, say I don't know how much they go for, maybe say £7,000, whatever that is, like around $10,000, a bit less. Would I be buying a Rolex Submariner now, a modern one? And
At
the answer is
retail.
no. Well, yeah, at retail or grey market or anything, would I be
Hmm.
buying a modern? I'm not particularly enamored by modern Rolex anyway, to be completely honest. And I was just like, would I rather do that, or would I rather get something vintage that I can really get involved with. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And so literally, I was sent through what I have got now instead. It's arriving tomorrow. Very excited. I was sent that through WhatsApp just from like a dealer friend I've got, and I was like, I literally within the space of half an hour texted another of my dealer friends, like, look, would you buy my Submariner? Because I found something else. And within a day, my first watch that I had no intention of actually selling was gone, and I'd bought something else, and I love that. So yeah, I don't even know why I've gone off on this tangent, but that's what's happened recently.
I love it.
What was the question?
Oh, there was no question. It was just a
Oh,
general
fine.
like how we doing and what's new. Do you want to
There
share
we go.
the new, or is that
Yeah.
we're going to keep that under wraps for
No,
now?
I will. I will. But I'm going to say the reference because I like testing you. So it's a
Sure, sure.
16753, which is,
Oh, right.
nipple
Yes.
dial. Yeah, nipple
Hmm.
dial kind of. And what I love about this is it's pretty beaten up. But I just have like an emotional connection to it. So I'm going to show you here if you can see that.
Oh yeah. Oh
So the
yeah.
dial's got like a really nice kind of tropical thing going on. The bezel's really scratched up. The bracelet isn't the original bracelet. I think I was very fortunate to get this from the family of the original owner.
Oh,
And
very nice.
apparently the original bracelet broke. So what the family did, which I find this absolutely mental, they put a Jubilee bracelet just off a date just on it, and then they had the inner links gold plated to try and match the
Oh
original.
my God.
I know.
Wow.
So I mean, yeah, I mean the bracelet looks very loose, so I'll probably chuck it on a NATO or sailcloth or something. But that's what's coming in. That's arriving tomorrow, and I I don't know if you or anyone listening ever goes through these periods, but I've kind of I felt my collecting journey sort of becoming quite stagnant, sort of losing that excitement, that buzz. I almost feel like, I mean, I know that you're particularly clean cut, but I'm just as a potential metaphor, it's almost as if you're like addicted to something,
Mhm.
whatever that substance or thing may be. And with every like as time goes on, each hit kind of you just don't get that buzz as much, and you kind of get to a point where you buy a watch and within like 3 hours you're already on Chrono 24 looking at something else. And like I was really adamant that that wasn't going to be my I felt like I was in a toxic relationship with watch collecting, right? So I deliberately hadn't bought anything. I've not, this is the first thing I've bought this year, I think, watch wise. And I really wanted to have a prolonged period of like contemplation, reflecting on what I've already got, the direction I want to go. And I've definitely bought stuff this year for the record. I just can't remember what I've got. Oh, I got a CWC G10, but I mean, that's fun. Um, but so when this came along, it was almost quite cathartic because the whole experience really excited me and like almost reactivated this like fire in me of like, okay, this is what it should feel like to find something because I've wanted one of those original root beers for years, but never really thought I'd be able to get it. And but I think letting go of that Submariner was almost like it was like therapy. It's like I
Mhm.
don't really like change or letting go of things, whatever that is really. And I think selling my first watch is something that most people probably will say you're crazy for doing, but I feel like I really needed it in my journey because I was just stagnant. So it's been a pretty good week from the I think the evolution from a watch perspective, watch collector's perspective. I think anyway, we'll see. I may regret it next time I speak to you, mate.
No, no. First off, well, congratulations, by the way. That's really, really cool. It's an
Thank you.
awesome addition. It sounds like, yeah, letting go of the sub was in a way a trigger to make you feel like it's okay to, move some things around. And now that that's happened and your comparison to like maybe a toxic relationship, maybe, we feel things out, maybe we need that pause in between to kind of reevaluate. Sometimes
Mm,
that's needed. And I think, and we'll get into it a little bit further into the episode, but I think rediscovering new watches, whether it's in the vintage arena or just new brands, is sort of the ultimate resolution or answer to that stagnation over like, okay, I need a bigger hit in order to feel like that excitement. And for me, at least personally speaking, from my individual experience, it's learning about new brands and finding out cool, creative approaches to watchmaking, uh, spanning the gamut as far as like price is concerned.
Mm.
Um, and I think something on your wrist, which we'll get into a little bit later, is a great example of this exact sort of scenario where the watchmaking that you can get at that price point is punching way above its class, and that's sort of exciting in and of itself. But the next
Mm.
question that I want to ask you is your father-in-law got you into this crazy hobby. Did he truly know what he was signing you up for, you think?
I think he knew because he's, like mad about watches. I don't think that he envisaged a world where I would actively try and join the community, as it were. I from my background in music, I have been very familiar with. Well, I just like a. This sounds weird. I yearn to like connect with people in different like arenas, and I saw the watch world as almost like Troy because the background I'm from, the typical demographic of people that would listen to the band's music that I'm in. And when I started collecting watches in 2017, I imagine the demographic was probably 18 to 24 year old women, right? And then if you think, I guess the typical demographic in the watch world, slightly older man, and those demographics rarely meet in anything, whether that's sport, music, whatever, like cinema, like they're quite different things, right? So I saw that as a real challenge, and I was thinking, well, you know, the dream scenario for me would be for me to go to a Red Bar event or something like that, Watches and Wonders or Dubai Watch Week on my own, and be able to hold conversation with people that typically would probably roll their eyes at what I was doing, music wise. And I always like to try and tackle those prejudices of people that people hold on kind of maybe the music that I make with the band, because underneath whatever people see or think they know about the band, we are a conventional instrumental band, nuclear band, guitar, bass, drums, vocals. Singer plays piano, and we kind of mix it up occasionally. But we're songwriters and musicians, and I think what I've really enjoyed is the watches. Obviously, are the talking point, and that's great. But then when you get further down the conversation with a lot of watch collectors, there's a real passion for music, and I think what I'm enjoying is getting to the point where I can build rapport with these people. And we might be talking about, you know, we might be talking about like Bob Dylan, for example. And I don't think, and like I like Dylan. I don't know loads about him. I love the film and great. But I think because I'm a songwriter and a musician, I really, really am inspired by people like Dylan. And I think you find these artists, whether it's Dylan or I don't know, or even someone like so Damien Rice, who's an Irish singer-songwriter, who's my biggest inspiration. Like me having a knowledge of those kind of artists that also, some watch collectors like. I don't think they expect me to be into that kind of music. I think, if you think conventional pop band, quote unquote, people presume, well, they probably don't actually really like music. They don't play instruments, they don't really write songs. They probably listen to like the radio for inspiration. And that's not who I am. And I think watches have enabled me to at least try and unpick some of those stereotypes I think people would perhaps have had of me before I got into watches.
It's very apropos because I've been diving into some of your own individual music, James
Mm.
McVey, aside from the Vamps. And I've had a moment where I kind of saw some overlap within all the various worlds that you kind of engage in. And to your point, all of our journeys are so personal within the watch world, but even so, we all have similar cornerstone experiences that, in a way, mark us. Yours is obviously a bit more musically inclined, but aside from the Vamps, like I previously mentioned, you also are now a solo artist. And in your track, which I, browsed through, Thick and Thin specifically stood out the core message, for me at least, speaks to a time of reflection. Sort of, again, my take, reminiscing of a time gone by. And specifically in that music video, interestingly enough, you wore a Ulysse Nardin Marine Torpilleur, I believe, which has a moon phase. And
Mm,
I would argue that that is the most romantic complication that there is.
yeah, I'm with you.
And I'd love
Yeah.
to hear a bit more about like why that watch for that music track. And that will sort of lead nicely into how our romantic outlook on the passing of time connects to our love for vintage timepieces. Because I know that your day date is a vintage piece at this point with the Linden dial, but I want to connect and sort of bridge that gap between, at first blush, James McVey can't be into watches because he's in a pop band, and there's sort of like some prejudice or um, background sort of judgment that gets passed. At the end of the day, sort of the connective tissue is our love for watches. All that to say, I would love to hear more about Thick and Thin, the watch that you wore in that music video, and how that ties into our love for all things old, things that, which you mentioned
Mm.
at the start, things that kind of have a story and more of a background to them.
Yeah, I mean, with the Elise Narden Marine, I mean, I agree with you that the moon phase is probably the most romantic complication. I think with that in particular, and it's interesting, we're referencing time and the passing of time and nostalgia and looking back. And I think if you think where Elise Narden started making marine chronometers in, when was it, like 1863 or something? I don't know. It's probably older than that, I don't know. But the brand nowadays, and I understand they do some amazing stuff, like the Diver Air, which is it's like 50 grams, lightest dive watch in the world, and the engineering into that it makes me feel like I had the privilege of being around one a few weeks ago in New York, and you feel like you're looking into the future. And I love the journey that UN has been on, in particular. If you think where they began, making these sort of like navigational devices for the French, British Navy and all, and to think that an idea that Mr. Ulysse Nardin started back then. I did a panel actually for the Booker Watch Week with Romain, who's I think he's head of sales for Ulysse Nardin, and I asked him, I was like, two things, like, do you ever think about where the brand started and where it is now, and then two, also, if Ulysse Nardin himself could see what's happened, what do you think he would feel? And I find it incredible, but also really sad that things that start, you think a lot of these big brands, like I don't know, anything, car brands or watch brands, they are started often hundreds of years ago by someone that never really truly sees the legacy that they create. And I guess you have that in music all the time. You look, we still reference Elvis all the time. Or even like James Dean in fashion. He wasn't even 30 when he died. And we have these people in time and history that really, like, make an impact, but they never really see the inspiration that they leave behind. And I think for Ulysse Nardin, I wanted to get something that is still nodding back to that, when that brand really was in its infancy, to an extent. I mean, obviously, it's a modern watch, but you have like a glimpse back to that classic heritage um, that brands that only a few brands have. But also, what I love is Ulysse Nardin in particular are not resting on their laurels. I think there's several brands, and I'm not going to name them, but there are brands that, in my eyes, are solely just presuming that the name alone of their brand that's been around since like 17, whatever, will sustain them without them needing to make any real changes. And I think Ulysse Nardin are one of those brands that, yeah, there's obviously been like ups and downs for the company over the years, but in what was it, 2001 or two, when they brought out the Freak, like,
Yeah.
for a brand of that like heritage to do something that innovative, that feels that futuristic, that kind of that leap into the unknown. I mean, an industry disruptor, the freak, like rightly named. I love brands that have that heritage, but then they're kind of like, well, we could just remain this brand that does these very like classic, almost like watchy timepieces, or do we push the envelope? And I think Elise and I don't do that. So I've got a freak as well, but I just thought with that marine in particular, I just love that's kind of where the brand. I want people. I don't want people to forget that that's where that brand kind of started. So that was the point of that. And I think if we're mentioning my song Thick and Thin, that song was written. So I did so that EP, which is called Letters Home, was completely written and recorded on tour. I was supporting a friend of mine, Henry Moody, who's kind of this. I mean, I was going to say up and coming, but he's doing really well now. Sort of like younger. He's like 10 years younger than me. So not only do I feel really old when I was touring with him, but I realized that like I don't know about your experience, but like people in their early 20s don't like even like drink anymore. So what was happening is he would go to bed early. I'd be sat on the tour bus with my with Alex, who's my co-writer and co-producer, and we would just like sit with a bottle of wine and some of his Welsh whiskey, and we'd get drunk on the bus, we'd write the song, and then we'd just get the laptop out and record it. And all of these songs from that EP were done solely on the tour bus. And they're very rough around the edges. But with that song, Thick and Thin, Alex and I just really wanted to just try and transport ourselves back to that moment when the world kind of, this sounds really like cliche, but like the world really felt small. And, we both, I mean, I grew up on the south coast of England in a county called Dorset, which any probably American listeners won't know where that is, but it's quite a sleepy kind of county on the south coast. We don't have a freeway, so it's that like the nearest like shopping center that's worth going to is maybe 45 minutes away. It was before social media, like, so I'm 32, so I feel I'm probably the last generation that we had like we texted. There was no internet on the phones until I was late teens, so there was this period of time when you're sort of like 12 to 16 where every day I just ride my BMX bike and we around our little area, and that would be it. That was my life. And I think even though it was so small and at the time felt insignificant, those moments really really sort of set me up to everything that followed. And the guy that song's about, a guy called Adam, is like still my best mate. And I think time's a weird thing, and I think back to those moments of it's there's a weird irony with hindsight where at the time all I wanted to do was leave and start a band and travel and whatever. But now I like the amount of money I pay to go back to the simplicity of that, where all your like day's agenda was school, riding your BMX, go home, someone's made you food, like someone's done the washing, and then I would play like World of Warcraft for like 7 hours. Like that was so simple. There was no real pressure. And I think that song is one that has resonated with a lot of people from around the world. And yeah, from a melodic and production standpoint, it does lean kind of into a more, I guess, like mainstream pop arrangement. But I think that's important because I didn't want to write a song about this kind of communal sense of longing to go back to that childhood innocence and then dress it up as something really left-leaning sonically that's quite hard to get into. I thought there's no point, like, let's just do effectively like a pop song and sing about this theme. So that's probably my like poppiest song, but I love it. And playing it live, I just get catapulted back to 2005 whenever I do that song, which I love.
I would venture to say that you captured that spirit of that longing of wanting to look back in that sense of home and security, and when everything was simple to understand. And I think a lot of viewers and listeners can relate to the human condition, which is when you are young, you want to not be young. You want to be old so that you can do things. And then the nature of time is it passes. We become old. We become big. We do those things. And then we yearn to go back and say, you know what? I think I'd rather just maybe have it be a little bit simpler, more
100%.
clean.
I don't know if you've seen this, but I've been getting it on TikTok, and it's like point of view you're at school in the 90s and it's like a slideshow reel. Fuck,
Yeah.
how old and like boomer did I sound then? A slideshow reel of photos, and it would be like a classroom from 1997, or like, and it would be the projector where they'd put there'd be like the sheet of paper that they'd peel off the thing and put it onto the wall, and then it would be the pens that you used to use, and the desks and all these things, and like the suites that you'd have. And there's some incredible, I don't even I can't describe the I sound really hippie and like I love crystals, but I get like a weird energy when I think about when I see something that takes me back to that thing. And I think it's probably because you have an overwhelming sense of mortality and fragility, I think, because you think, oh my God, that was 25 years ago. I can never go back there, no matter how much I want to. And so you think that, but then what I find really weird is no matter how much I can long to go back to a time that I'm not in, I am in present. I am completely unable to recognize the importance that in 10 years I'll probably feel the same about this period now. And
This
I
exact
have this
moment. Yeah.
like, yeah, this kind of like cognitive dissonance of not being able to think, okay, you get quite emotional about back then. Why don't you, sort yourself out now so then you don't think about this in another 20 years? It's a funny thing, isn't it? Funny thing.
It really is. Time is linear, unfortunately, and the march of it continues in one direction. How do you
Mm.
think this ties into sort of the appreciation and love that you have for vintage timepieces?
I think that for me, and it's like slightly different, but I for my birthday a couple months ago, I I was in an antique shop on the South Coast, and I ended up buying it's a cavalry carbine from 1886, sort of like a small rifle that would have been worn on horseback, probably with one hand, like hand on there on the reins of the horse, the other one shooting, and it still kind of cocks and shoots and stuff. And and look, I I'm not into kind of the thought of what that gun maybe had done, but I think holding something or wearing something from a completely different time, like like my day date, which is from either 69 or 70. You think 50 plus years ago, who who bought that brand new from their AD? What kind of person was that? I will never know. There's no way of me knowing. Like, and trying to, I think I'm realizing as I get older and collect more things, especially more vintage, that I think for a long time I feel like there's been a role reversal with me and my watch. So for a long time I'd be like, and this sounds really like airy fairy, but I thought the watch was serving me, right? Tell the time, what's the day, what's the date. But actually there's been this weird transition where I feel like I'm the custodian of that watch. And the watch I thought would look after me, but I'm looking after that watch because, I have no idea how many people have owned my watches. But I've only ever bought a couple of watches brand new. Most of them have come from someone else and will go to someone else. And I love trying to jump into my imagination of, okay, who bought that day date? Or I've got a 1963 Seiko Matic, which was the first. It's called a self data, I think, and it was the first automatic watch that Seiko made. And with Grand Seiko coming in, was it 1960 or 61? Like it was that kind of very interesting time in Seiko. And that the watch that I've got would have been bought probably by a relatively like high achieving, I imagine Japanese. Well, it would have been a Japanese man or woman, and I have no idea who that person is, and I don't have a clue what they did. And it's just these kind of, and I think this is part of why I sold my Submariner, because I kind of knew everything about it. Like I knew the person that I bought it from, and they got it from their AD like 6 months before. Watches for me are little glimpses into a life that I can't go back to and will never really be able to understand. And I find that fascinating. And it's even stuff like, God, I'm sad, but I get excited about like tritium dials because I'm like, ooh, or like tropical dials. Like I'm like, that's amazing. That must have seen so much sunlight, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Equally at the same time, I get oddly excited about finding vintage watches that are in immaculate condition because I'm thinking like, okay, why has that just been sat in a safe for that long? Why like who owned this? And I think there's a few items you get it in. I think cars maybe even more so because you can really sit in it and feel like the smells and everything around you. But there's I think in this world where we are so, especially with what I do and you do with video games, we're so used to screens, very quick attention spans, onto the next thing. And I think every so often for me, I like to look at one of my like vintage watches and just really try and appreciate it for what it is and how it's almost like sticking two fingers up to where the world's going. Like, um, and there's a beautiful simplicity in that that I don't think many people often get anymore in their day-to-day life. So for me, that's why vintage. I mean, and you kind of touched upon it earlier. For us, we probably all get into watches, whether we want to accept or admit it or not. We get into watches initially because it's a flex, or we feel like we should buy a Rolex Datejust, or like something like that. Or even if you're starting with like G-Shocks or Casios, it's like you think, okay, what should I get at the start? But then you realize, yeah, you might go through the phases of buying a few things, but you do soon realize it's the people that you do it for. The thing on your wrist is great, but it's the connections, it's the merging of cultures, of religions, of nationalities, everything. And I think for vintage, that almost explodes in my head even more. But I will never be able to know who owned it. So it's just trying to teleport myself back to these places where these watches originally were and imagine the journey they've been on. I think that's why I am more into vintage than modern nowadays.
This kind of ties in really nicely with what I wanted to explore a bit more, and that is specifically Christopher Ward.
Yeah.
You are right now, quick wrist check, wearing a Christopher Ward, are you not? And
Yeah,
what
I've got
is
the
it?
Loco.
The
Yeah,
Loco.
so it's the Loco, which, yeah, I love it, man. I mean, I obviously good friends with Andrew Morgan, who's been a big part of this launch, and I was involved to an extent, but not quite like Andrew. He actually knows what he's talking about. I just say, oh, I like that color. I think what they've been able to achieve is actually kind of wild. I mean, the thing I keep saying to people is 144-hour power reserve, and it's like that. Most people like, as in most people on the outside of the watch world are like, one, I don't know what that is. Two, I don't really care. But I
Right.
just think to be able to offer 6-day power reserve, like twin barrel, like it's just real. It's just real. I don't know how they do it, man. Like, and that's what I love about the brand. Like, they've only been around for 20 years, but they're not. The Bel Canto was like a home run. The 12 did really well. They could have they could have chilled and been like, let's just not do anything. But they're like, no, like it's this is like a year and well, probably over a year in the making. And you think in the last few years, we've had the pandemic, obviously loads of horrible things happening on in the world, and they've been able to kind of like just be innovative and be like, no, let's do it. We're going to make something amazing. And I love that about Mike and the rest of the team there. They like to push the envelope. They're not just chilling. They're not just holding on the name or the success of something. They're like, no, what can we do? Um, and I think even like the name is funny. Like they the marketing behind it, it's just great. Like people think the good thing about this, and I had the same thing with the Bel Canto. When I first saw renders of the Bel Canto, I was like, there's no way this is going to be good in the metal. You know, I was like, is it CGI picture? Like, is it gonna just feel rubbish? And I got hands on with the Bel Canto. We did the Vamps did our 10-year anniversary. We finished our 10-year anniversary tour playing the Royal Albert Hall, which is a venue in London that's kind of really old and really cool venue actually. And I borrowed a Bel Canto from it was one of the press ones that was doing the circuit. So I think Britt Pierce actually had the one I borrowed, and so I think she sent it to me, and I wore it for the show, and literally I just had vocal surgery, so whilst all the other boys went out on like a big night out, I was in bed within 40 minutes of getting off stage, but I had the Bel Canto still on my wrist. And that evening, I messaged Chris Ford and I was like, I need to buy one of these right now. And like I've never really had that with a watch where within the space of like an afternoon of wearing it, I've ordered it. I did that with them. So when I started seeing early pictures of the Loco, I was like, well, I know that you've nailed it with the Bel Canto, but it's hard to make what you've if you're looking at like a checklist on paper of what they've achieved with this, it's hard to get that looking good for that price. And I think they've upped it with the finishing. It looks good under macro. Like I'm just I'm just genuinely really impressed with it. And I wore this in New York a couple of weeks ago, and two people one evening bought one in front of me because it was as the order window went open, and they were like, and they kind of said what I've just said. They knew that Chris would do good stuff, but you see pictures online and you're always a bit hesitant and reluctant to think that a brand is able to offer something to the market that the competitors, and I know there's been comparisons with like Chapek or whatever, but look at how much they cost. It's
Yeah.
not, in my eyes, it's almost like a pointless comparison. How many people make a dive watch that looks exactly the same? And I'm not, I see similarities, but it's not the same offering. But no, they are great, and the people are lovely, and British with obviously the Britain and Swiss cohesion. I just think they're doing good stuff, man. I think there's a real nice movement coming out of the UK. Everyone's helping each other, and Chris Ward are kind of really in the driver's seat for innovation, which I love.
The British Watchmaking Day really showcases that very, very well, with all the brands coming together, and of course Andrew doing such a great job of supporting and being there. And I'm sure that you've attended as well and done all that you can. It's really inspiring and refreshing to see the UK coming back strong in the watch sector. Now, you mentioned the Bel Canto, and I know that there's a story there. You have a special one made, piece unique, in fact. In the past, you've explained the journey and the story of what that is, but it kind of dawned on me with us talking about how you are viewing the watches that you currently have as though you are their stewards, in a way, like you're watching after them. Has it dawned on you that that piece unique will have a very, very cool, interesting, and special story tied to it? Let's say fast forward 20 years into the future.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, well, I've not thought about it, to be honest. I think when there is like I have this weird conflict in me with collecting at the moment, because I am getting pulled really to vintage 98% of the time, but then things like a Bel Canto or the Loco will come out, and I'm like, I really like that, and it's so different to what I normally go for. So I've not thought about the potential future romanticism around things like my piece unique. But I have been saying to people recently, I think one of my biggest fears in life is in how old am I? In 50 years, if I'm lucky, when I die, I have a fear that someone's gonna, like, I don't know what it would be. My great grandchildren or grandchildren, whatever, will find this box of all my watches under the bed and not care about it and just sell them all. And I think that's awful. I mean, if they need the money, do it, whatever. But I just think the emotion that we attach to these inanimate objects, especially if, we're fortunate enough, like I am with that Bel Canto, to have a piece unique that really captured a moment in my life that I think I'm very fortunate. Most people don't experience kind of the touring and the music success that I've had, and I really appreciate that. And I think having a watch from that period is something that, as I get older, I will look back and I'll think, God, you played the Royal Albert Hall wearing a Bel Canto, and then you designed this with the brand. And I just think, when I'm a lot older and no one cares about my music anymore, I can think at one point in time, a watch brand wanted to work with me, and we designed a watch together. I think that's quite cool. When I'm in the care home, losing my mind, and someone's wheeling me around, they're saying, "Of course you designed a watch, James. Of course you did." Just James has gone fucking mental again today. I can see that happening.
He's talking about like a mechanical watch that dings on the hour. I don't even know what that means.
That's funny. Yeah.
Still on the Bel Canto. If the Bel Canto was to be represented by a song, what song would you say best fits it?
I think I'd love, like Pink Floyd. Wish You Were Here. Dun. I can imagine that dun, 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 being somehow like I think the bel canto is a D note that
A
it does.
D.
I just imagine that. Like I think the song has to be kind of like slow and melodic, but like have some nostalgia in it. I do that. Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd. I'm not sure. I mean, we've not even started talking about it yet, but I do want to develop another watch with Christopher Ward that perhaps uses similar theme to my bel canto, but maybe with a real piece of one of my guitars. I'd love to do that. And the guitar in question is one that was the first guitar that I got when I started the band. And that's, that guitar is probably my most like sentimental item. So I think if that watch was to ever come into fruition, then it would have to be a Vamps song. And I'd probably do the first song that we ever released, which is a song called Can We Dance. So I'd probably do that for that watch. But I mean, these are all hypothetical scenarios. This future watch doesn't even exist yet. So, and that's not what you asked me. So
It's fine. No, it gives birth to another question. Would this future watch actually be inspired by this guitar, or would it contain an actual piece of the guitar?
I mean, again, they have not said that they'd do it. So, but I did give them the guitar a couple months ago. So I wanted them to hang it in their office. Because it's a weird thing. Like, it's my most sentimental item, but the last time I ever used it was, I think it was 2017. We did like an O2 Arena show, and I got the other boys from the band to sign it, and I wrote on the front of it, O2 Arena with the date, and the boys signed it. So I think there's this like constant feeling of uncertainty and yeah, like vulnerability in the music industry where you have no idea. Like, every time I step off the O2, or even like some of the smaller venues, wherever we are, or like if I go to certain countries, there's a genuine sense of not knowing if I'll ever do that again. I
Mm.
want to, but you just don't know. So I think the last time I I thought that's probably the last time I'd ever played the O2 and it was with that guitar. Um, so I signed it, and but since then it's been sat in its case in my attic for like 8 years or whatever. So I thought, I don't really want to hang it up in the house because this is the only room I'm allowed to hang my band memorabilia, and you can't see, but it's like it's there. It's like kind of all round, and there's no room for the guitar in here. So I thought, well, if I'll tell you, I'll let you into the secret. I thought if I give it to Christopher Ward, they'll probably put it in a really nice frame that then at some point I can take back. So I've given them the guitar, and I would love for them to cut a little hole out of the back of it and put it into a dial. So I need to see if I can persuade them into doing that. We'll see. And it's
That would
it's the same it's the same sunburst as what my bel canto is, but it's a Gibson. So the bel canto was based on a Fender Stratocaster sunburst, but my guitar that I've given them is a Gibson. It's a like a hollow body. So for guitar nerds, it's a 339, which is hollow body but small, and it's a like a sort of caramelly sunburst. So I'd love to cut a circle out of that and put that into a dial. But again, we don't even know if it's possible, man. Like the width or the thinness that you have to cut the wood to put into a dial. I don't even know if it's possible. So, and the last thing I'd want to do is for them to cut holes in this guitar and then it doesn't work.
here's what I'm going to say. We're going to manifest this, and I'm going to say the next time you and I jump in a podcast, I can't wait for you to tell me and show me that watch.
Okay, let's do it. Yeah,
Okay.
good
All
shout.
right.
Yeah,
Um, I wanted to also go over something that I know is very near and dear to your heart.
yeah.
And it's especially important nowadays, given all the things that are happening in the world, and that is mental health. You founded the Vamps back in 2011 and have been making music even before then, from everything that I've learned. So there's over 15 plus years of creative sort of rhythm and flow in you. For any aspiring musicians watching or listening, but also for those that are sort of in the thick of it all, even seasoned musical vets, this life that you live has to be quite a lot. Like in aggregate as a whole. It's a lot. How do you manage to stay creative and be a loving family man and travel and keep healthy and sort of generally speaking keep sane? What keeps James McVey grounded and sort of centered while still being able to do what you do and keep that balanced mental outlook in place?
Well, I think off the bat, I'm absolutely not sane. And I think that's something that I try to regularly convey, and it might only be once every couple of years, but I think because I've been fortunately given a platform to speak on for, you know, over 10 years now, whether that's TV, radio, or even just social media. And I always have spoken about mental health and the ups and downs. And I think there's this scenario, or there was definitely a scenario where I thought a few years ago that it just looked like, I think people presume that, I spoke about it for a few years and therefore it's just like fixed and sorted and we move on, whatever. And I think from my perspective, and I don't know how other people feel, but, you know, irrespective of the fact that I've done, yeah, probably hundreds of hours of podcasts and TV and radio and whatever, speaking about my mental health, I still go through like prolonged periods of depression, anxiety, and issues with my relationship with food and exercise and dieting. And I think almost kind of there's no predictability from in my experience with my mental health. I can feel like I've really made some progress. It's like for me, what if I used an analogy, it would be like I'm in a boat that's got like a loads of water in it, and I'm sort of like I've got a bucket and I've been chucking out the bucket, and just as that last bucket comes, then a massive wave comes and I go back again. It's a constant thing. So that on one side, and I think that for the few fortunate people that don't experience any negative mental health, I don't know how you do it, but most of us, I think that is our relationship with our mental health, whether we want to accept it or not. And the biggest thing I struggle with, that is a catalyst, I think, for poor mental health episodes is uncertainty, unpredictability, instability, volatility. And my career is the epitome of that. There is no, like, don't get me wrong, I have been very fortunate, very successful. 99% of bands don't make it. The ones that do, probably a handful get past the second album, and let alone 5 albums and the touring and everything. So I get that. I'm very, very fortunate with that. I think though, even with all of that and the touring and things, like, there is still a real kind of like the future for me. There's no clarity in the direction that I'll go, and some people are happy with that. Some people are nomadic. They love kind of the freedom to kind of just go with the wind and whatever. But when you start trying to settle and lay your roots, and that is kind of the opposite of what you get being in the music industry, where you have to be able to, yeah, like run with the wind and be like, okay, we're gonna go here now, we're gonna do that, blah 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 blah. Okay, well, fine, whatever. Let's go to India now. Like that's kind of not that's not how life normally works. And I think I struggle with that because the sort of person that I am from a mental health perspective, I think would really benefit from having at least a partial grasp of like my future. And I often kind of joke with my friends, and again, I never want to portray like the notion that I don't love what I do or understand how fortunate I am. Like I get that. I always feel like I need to reaffirm that. But with that said, I often say to my friends, like, like over the years, even when we've been really, really busy with touring, I'll be like, dude, sometimes I wish I could just wake up and have like a 9 to 5 for a bit, because at least like, even though, and my friends are always like, James, shut up, you're being ridiculous. And I am being ridiculous. I've got the dream job. I get it. But sometimes when I'm going through a really like low period, I'm like, dude, I wish that I knew. And I know there's instability in everyone's careers. You can be let go. I get it. It's really, especially at the moment, it's really tough, like the working environment. But sometimes I just wish I could be like, okay, let's just like copy and paste a little bit. So then at least I know that for the next few years I can work towards a goal that's not going to move. Because often in the music industry, what happens is you have like a set of goalposts that you're trying to kick the ball into. Just as you're about to do that, the goalpost move somewhere else. And that adaptation for someone like me with my mental health is a really difficult process to navigate. So I think like through the years of being in the band, the things that have kind of kept me somewhat sane, um, it's just being able to have people that you trust. I think trust is a big thing. Um, whether that's like partners, family, friends, like the guy I wrote Thick and Thin about, he's been there, hence the title, Through Thick and Thin. Um, and that's, I think, if I was going through, and also actually like avoiding temptations, I think that's something that breaks up a lot of bands and you lose yourself very quick. And the reality is when I started the band, I'm the oldest and I was like 17. So we were kids. And I think if you're not careful, you can get lost and go down a path that's really hard to get back from. If you're going into the band as kids, when you come out the other side, or whatever that looks like, you're still a kid in a way, but all of a sudden you've got like a drug addiction. So you're like a 17-year-old kid that doesn't know how to look after themselves and you're addicted to drugs. It's like, it's not a healthy place to be. So it's been a lot of saying no over the years, from our perspective, but also acknowledging the opportunity. And I think that's something that gets lost, especially when you add in drugs, alcohol, and money, and I guess people. It's very easy to lose the real reason that you're doing it. And for us, at the crux of it, it was because we loved writing songs and performing songs. Everything else, obviously like the success and the touring, that's amazing and it's been incredible. But at the end of the day, we'd still be making music even without that success. So I think having a constant reminder of why you do it is good. I think finding, and the last thing, how do you find inspiration, motivation to carry on creating? The honest truth is, I really fell out of love with songwriting for a long time. So when the band was probably, I hate saying like at its most busy because that makes me think, that gives the impression that we don't want to do it anymore and it's kind of winding down. That's not, but when it was really, really hectic in the probably second to third album area where we were away for 90% of the time, writing an album on the road and stuff, I just fell out of love with writing, and I didn't even have a guitar in my house for, I think it was about 5 years, which blows my mind now because I've probably got 10 guitars here, and every day I'll play guitar, I'll write something. And I think the reality is, from my perspective, I can only write songs when I am willing to like knock on the door of my emotions. And I think for a long time with the band, I was kind of numb to addressing issues I was having, be that struggling with an eating disorder, feeling depressed, maybe, relationships with friends, family, partners. Like I would just kind of bury my head in the sand and just think, well, we're in Australia today, we're doing a show, we'll do that. And then I'll get really drunk afterwards. And then, I'll wake up and I'll go to the gym. I was just like running away from, I think, a lot of that. And that's not good. So now in the last I think the pandemic was a forced period of contemplation and pause. And with that, I mean, it kind of coincided with the band doing our fifth album, which was, so we did a 5-album deal and we completed it. And so we've been on sign for a long time. So there was this kind of period of uncertainty from the band side. And I naturally just fell into songwriting, which I hadn't done for a number of years. And now, I've been writing a lot of music, and it's kind of, I think you need to it's like, for me, what I always say about people that want to get in songwriting is like, I really struggle with trying to write something that's not real. So I've done a lot of writing sessions in my life where we've gone in and someone's been like, oh, let's do a concept where like, what about if someone felt this way about that thing? And I'm like, well, do you feel that way about that thing? And they're like, no, but just imagine if someone did. And I'm like, I really struggle to do that, as opposed to my music, my solo music, which, yeah, doesn't necessarily tick like the check boxes of commerciability or, like a 2-second TikTok moment. It doesn't do that. But every song I write is something I felt. It's not like about someone else or whatever. It's me. And I think it took me a long time to realize that was songwriting. I kind of probably got lost in the whole treadmill nature of the music industry for a long time. So when the pandemic came, I was like, okay, why did I get into songwriting when I was 11 years old? Oh, it was because I really liked this girl and I wanted to say it, but I couldn't say it to her face, so I wrote a song. So I was like, okay, let's adopt that mindset for songwriting again. What do you want to write about? And I realized I was going through a really, really low period of mental health for a long time. And I just started writing that day. I was like, hey, I'm just going to start writing and see what comes. I wasn't thinking about like perfect rhymes or trying to be too obscure. I just wrote a song. And I think sometimes that's remembering why you got into songwriting at the start is what you need to have longevity in it. And but that doesn't mean it's easy, man. Like there's been years where I've just been like, I don't want to write anymore. It, but it comes back, man. It's like an addiction to me. I can't get away from it for too long because it'll always come back.
That just reminds me of sort of the golden advice, which is just write what because the goodness, the realness, the authenticity just shines through in those scenarios. But well done, and good on you for keeping true to your roots. It also reminds me of sort of the importance of guidance and mentorship. Obviously, you clearly grew up in the music realm where you were surrounded by it from an early age, 11 when you first started. How important is it to have someone to advise you, to guide you, and care enough sort of help nudge you in the right direction? Every now and then we all need a little bit of a course correction. Did you have someone like that in your life, and how did that impact you?
I didn't have particularly musical parents. My dad loved like listening to music as like a consumer and would play music from to me from a young age. I have like real memories of like not even being able to like walk, but like knowing music, which is quite interesting. Uh, but I think the thing that I was really fortunate to have is my parents were just so supportive of me doing it. So it would be things like when I was trying to get gigs, like I mentioned, I grew up on the South Coast. There wasn't, I mean, there was a music scene, but the music scene was you would play in pubs, or there was I mean, there's barely any small independent music venues anymore in the UK. I don't know about in the States, but in where I grew up, there was a handful of them. But in order to get in there, it was quite hard, and I was 13, 14 when I started like wanting to do gigs. And like, my mum would call all these places up, or we'd send emails, or they would save up and pay for me to go into like a recording studio, which is funny because now I've spent so much time, like years in well, thousands and thousands of hours in recording studios. The recording studio that I did my first stuff on, it was literally I'd go in and the guy would just like press play and then that'd be it. There would be no like wouldn't build a track, or it would literally be a almost like I don't know if you've seen the Dylan film, but when they're recording then it is literally live, and that's how I started recording. And my parents were the facilitators of that. It was probably £100 for 2 hours or something. They'd drive me there. If there was a gig, no, wherever we could get a gig, wherever. I mean, we did gigs in like I did a couple in London when I'd never been to London. My dad would drive up to there's a venue in Balham called the Bedford, which I never knew at the time, but the same time I was doing those gigs, age sort of 14, 15, Ed Sheeran was doing them too. And he's a couple of years older than me. So like that, it was that kind of place where people would come and you'd send emails and be like, please can my son play some songs here, whatever. And you never get paid for it. But it was that kind of thing. And my parents being willing to really sacrifice their own time and completely go outside their comfort zone. Like I got booked in a nightclub supporting someone that was on the X Factor in like 2000 well, it would have been 2009 maybe. And I performed at 3 a.m. in, I think it's at the time it was like the biggest gay club in Europe, and it was in Birmingham. And bear in mind I was 15, so I don't know if I should have even been allowed it. I definitely shouldn't have been allowed in there. But my parents like I don't think my parents had ever even been to a nightclub, let alone the biggest like gay nightclub in Europe. Like some of the things I saw in there I mean, it was amazing. I was like, wow, what this is something I've never never been familiar with. I don't, it's crazy. And but then my parents are walking me to the stage there, like sort of pushing me through the crowd, like with my guitar case, and like that my parents were really it's really loud and like just completely out of my parents' comfort zone. And like they've always been there for me, supporting me. And I think whilst I didn't have someone like a musical mentor per se, I think having that sort of safety net around me, my parents, where I could be like, look, I really would like, to get a guitar, or I need to record, or, can you drive me to this place? They would always be like, okay, how can we do that? Yes. And I think that's something that as I've got older, I've appreciated how lucky I've been, because there's so many people in the music industry that just didn't have any support like that. And they were on their own, like sleeping on their friends' sofas, like getting the train on, like all this stuff. And I was very lucky that my parents were, they didn't have loads of spare cash. It wasn't like that. I wasn't like bankrolled through my career at all. But, it would be, we'll just make it work one way or another. But I think, I have met, there's someone, the guy that I work with, Alex, the producer, he's a bit younger than me, and he had a mentor in a songwriter in the UK called Amy Wadge, who's like, she wrote Thinking Out Loud for Ed Sheeran. That was like her first like big hit, and she's done loads of good stuff. She did a lot of my first EP, and she's been an amazing mentor to me, but also to Alex. And I think what's been interesting for me is almost finding a bit of a mentor at the age of like 30, because normally, you have them when you're younger if you have them. But yeah, I kind of feel like, oh, it's nice to be this age and feel, oh, I can still learn from people. And I think finding, or like learning lessons through people as you go through life is really important, because the moment you sort of switch off the ability to listen to advice is when I think you stop growing and evolving, and actually kind of recede into this point of feeling like you know everything, and you're just like an isolationist, which I think is quite dangerous.
I think it's beautiful to have sort of the ultimate mentors, having raised you as a child and then supporting your dream to become a musician.
Mm.
It's wonderful to hear that that was the case for you. And I'm so
Yeah.
happy that it worked out so well. I would imagine, like you said, it was pretty wild to see some of the things and experience some of the um, life events that you did at that age. But I would also imagine that it taught you a lot. So that's very, very cool. I am curious though, when you do write music, do you wear a particular watch, or is it more dependent on sort of the mood, the vibe, and sort of the tone of the track that you are actually writing? Is that what dictates the watch you wear, or is it more like the watch that dictates?
I think in the creative process, I don't think about that too much. I think I go through phases with a watch and do everything in it. So I'll typically maybe wear the same watch for like 2 or 3 days and then rotate out. But I think when I'm in the studio, I don't really think about that. But I do massively think about that when I'm touring, because I only travel with a couple of watches, maybe like 4 watches at a time. And I only really do that when it's safe to do so. Like, so if we're on tour bus and we've got security and stuff, I wouldn't like rock around with 4 or 5 watches on my own on a train, like especially in London. But when I'm selecting what I take on the road, I typically, I don't know if other people do this when they travel for business or whatever, but I take like 4 or 5 and I end up just wearing like the same one. I don't know what it is. It's weird. As opposed to when I'm at home, I'll rotate every couple of days. But I think I tend to think about, I tend to, yeah, like meet certain criteria. So normally I want something that I can wear and swim and be active in, and that could be anywhere from like a G-Shock all the way through to an Explorer 2. I don't have my Explorer 2 anymore, but something like that, like a real, like you can beat it up. There's no nonsense. And I guess my Submariner was that for a while, but now it's probably going to be my Black Bay 58 maybe, or Black Bay Pro. And then I want something that's kind of like fun. So that would, for me, typically that's either, it's funny like how these things are all at very different price points, but they tick the same box. So the fun thing could be anywhere from like my Watermelon from Studio Underdog all the way through to my Freak. And because the Freak I've got, it's the X Ops, which sorry, OP is it? No, Ops, where it's like a green camo on like a Velcro strap, and that's really fun. So I'll tick that box. And then it's something like always go vintage for probably two of them. I typically like to have something with a complication. So I mean, GMT complication for me is just like the perfect one, especially around the world. So I'll either take a GMT, so that would probably be either Pepsi or, well, this new root beer that's coming. That would be a definite yes. And then something really dressy just in case, because I quite like the thought of where I like where it's, so my day date, for example. I really like wearing something like that somewhere that it was never probably intended to be worn like originally. So
Yeah.
um like I'll wear it in, like, yeah, t-shirt and jeans on stage in an arena in Manchester when it was probably in a boardroom, originally for the first 40 years of its life. And then also in that kind of fun category, Christopher Ward comes into as well. So I keep on forgetting I ordered the Snake 12 that they did. I don't know if you saw that, it's the green dial with Snake on the, yeah, on the dial, and I completely forgot I ordered that literally just until I mentioned it then. That would be a really fun tour watch. I've got it on the rubber, so I try and think about different scenarios that I could. It's like, dude, it's like people pack clothes in a suitcase. I do that with watches. I'll get like a few of them out, and I'll be like, okay, what do I want to wear? Blah blah blah. So to get inspiration, not hugely. I mean, maybe sometimes if we're going into a period of time where, okay, we really need to knuckle down and like have no nonsense, let's be serious, I might wear like my two-tone date just with the diamond markers, because I'm like, this is like someone that bought this in 1994 from their AD. They were probably a very serious person, so I should take that and try and channel some of that seriousness. But no, to be honest, mate, I love mixing it up as much as I can and trying to. I like combining yeah, dressier watches with more casual attire, and then vice versa, to be honest.
I love that. I love that so much. Trying to channel this sort of spirit or ethos that a watch may have sort of naturally lived into a scenario that you're actively in right now, let's say 20, 30 years from that like inception genesis point is great.
Yeah.
Speaking of sort of genesis and inception, if you could go back in time to a moment where you entered the watch world, what is one sort of great piece of advice that you'd give your younger self?
With watch collecting, I don't know about you or if you're listening, but I I think I've learned a lesson, and then I realize as another couple of years goes by, actually, you're constantly learning, your taste is changing. I think what I would say is I don't regret any of my purchases. So, like, there is a part of me that wishes that I'd been into it a little bit sooner, because I think after I got my sub and then I got a couple of things, but I wasn't really actively engaged in in the watch community, and I think that just happened to coincide with a period of time that I was very fortunate to be extremely successful with the touring and with the band, and I had a lot more money then to have fun with, because it was before I really had responsibilities, and it was also a time when it was before the prices went astronomical in the pandemic, and obviously they're a bit down now, but like I said, I was really into Explorer 2s, but I didn't really know anything about them. And I could have picked one up for probably 2.5 grand back then. So I think I just wish that I wish that I'd done a bit of a deep dive sooner into things. And I wish I'd learned earlier on the importance of the people, because I think, yeah, for a while I sort of drifted through, just get the occasional watch and not really, I didn't even know what it was. I did like a friend of mine, Andy Green, does a podcast. I'm not shouting out competitors. I won't name the podcast, but he's a really good friend of mine.
It's not like that. It's never like that. No, no, bring on the
but
love.
so okay, so he does a podcast called the OT Podcast, right? And he said to me like 3, 4, no longer, 5 years ago, would you come on the pod and talk about watches? And I was terrified. And I remember being on there like talking about this particular watch I had, and I had literally no idea what I was talking about. And I kind of wish that I'd taken a bit of time back then to really just, yeah, just, I wish I was obsessed back then as I am now. But I guess, that's life, isn't it? You realize as time goes on that some things are important, other things aren't. I'm very fortunate though that I didn't buy anything stupid. I've never, I've never really been like forced into making a decision that I've later regretted with purchasing. And I think a lot of that comes down to my appreciation for my father-in-law because from day one, I've said this a lot on various different things, but from day one, he's he's had like such a spectrum of brands that he liked. So Christopher Ward were one of the first brands that was ever mentioned to me because he had, I can't remember the reference. Is it like a, I mean, it's kind of like an homage to an Explorer 2. Is it C6, C60 or C63? I always forget. I rubbish with that stuff. So from very early, I knew about them. I knew about like Bamford, for example. I knew about like Casio, but then at the same time, I knew about Omega, Tudor. I knew about Halios. He's a big Halios fan. Um, so I knew all of these different brands, which basically meant yes, I did buy a Submariner for my first watch, but at the same time, I was immediately interested in things like Vertex, for example. Um, because I'm really into history and the whole Dirty Dozen thing pulled me in. So I was very lucky that I wasn't just like, okay, I'm going to buy 5 modern Rolexes and that's going to be my watch collection. I didn't do that. I kind of started quite early with like a variety of brands from all different price points. So I'm very lucky. I don't have any regrets. I don't think, mate.
Well, that's good news. That's good to hear. That means
Yeah,
that you've done well. So we asked what advice you'd give your younger self as far as the
yeah.
watch world goes, but for anyone that's listening or watching that might be more musically inclined or is here just because of the music background, what advice would you have for someone that is looking at starting their journey within the musical space and they're curious to kind of learn from someone that's been there and is still there actively?
I think if I could do my time again, I would say to myself, if thing is, there's two answers that I'll give. One, if you're trying to do it, and then the second one is if it's happening for you. I think the biggest thing I'd say about the first is like really try and work on, like, I know it seems so basic, but I could have learned piano in the early days. I played guitar all my life, and there was a period of time when me and our singer both started sort of trying to play piano, and I was like, I can't be bothered. He's now an amazing pianist because he stuck at it. But the point is, like, whether it's playing your instrument or songwriting, I just think like don't just let it sit because it's not going to get better on its own. I think you have to take active steps to encourage that growth. I think another thing that I was quite reluctant to accepting is the value in listening to music that perhaps doesn't immediately draw you to it. So a really good example for me is Bon Iver, who I've loved obviously his more like catchier songs over the years, like Skinny Love and all that stuff. I love like great. I've always liked that. But then he just brought out an album recently and it's the sort of thing like if I was to first listen to it and he's got a song with a guy called McGee, a guy called Dijon, like it's like very cool quote unquote music, right? And normally I'm drawn to the more simple production kind of folk music that's very easy, very nostalgic, familiar melodies, familiar chord structures and stuff. Um, but I was like, no, I'm gonna really like listen to this over and over. And now I'm obsessed with that album, and that's really, really inspiring my songwriting now. So I think if you're trying to get into it, I think songwriting is just like fundamental from my personal opinion. Do that, but also yeah, listen to other things because you may not realize how songs from different backgrounds could inspire your songwriting. And then the second answer I would say, which I really regret, is if things are working for you, and that could be anywhere from getting your first gig in a pub all the way through to selling out the O2 Arena or whatever, like really try and live as things are happening because the nature of the music industry in particular, I would say probably a good 5 years of my life were a complete blur, like a complete blur. And it was like worldwide sold out arena tours, top 10 songs, number one albums and all that stuff. Like for the first time in my life, like making money that I just didn't understand. And it was wild. I was 22 years old, whatever. But I was so determined to get onto the next thing because in the industry, definitely back then, it was all about, okay, well, where are we going next? Let's see the calendar. Where's this? And when you do that, it just means that you're constantly living for the next day as opposed to living for the present day. And that is something that, and again, it's a bit like, oh, woe is me, because yeah, I had an amazing time, but I can't really, like, I had a real example of this 2 days ago, where someone asked me if I'd been somewhere, and I literally had to Google the Vamps and then the name of the town because I had no idea if I'd ever been. I can't remember where it was. It was somewhere like a state in America, um, and I'm just like, I can't remember a lot of that stuff because I remember being there thinking, well, I'm already thinking about tomorrow. So really try and embrace and be present in the moment because you will look back 10 years later and wish you could do it again, but it's too late then.
Beautifully said. Golden advice. I think there's that saying, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's sort of like, I wish we knew when we were living in the good times
Yeah.
while we were living them. But that is just, again, the crux of time. It's linear, and
Yeah.
experience is gained quite literally by living and walking through this journey. And
Yeah.
so it goes sometimes. But well done. You've done it, James. You've reached the end. As a thank you, I'd like to offer you the opportunity to talk about something that you feel passionate about or something that you'd like to shine a light on. This could be literally anything from a local nonprofit to a great movie that you just watched and you just can't stop thinking about, to a book that you'd recommend or a cause that you'd like people to learn more about. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, I think people will presume that I will try and be all, you know, honorable and mention things. And, I do work with a lot of charities and things, but I think, I would do myself a disservice if, as a completely independent, self-funded artist, I didn't urge people to maybe have a listen to some of my solo music. And, I record 75% of everything in this room, which is the spare bedroom in my house. The other 25% is recorded probably on the road somewhere. So it's very much like you'll hear in some of my earlier music, like a sort of creaking. And it's me recording guitar on this chair, which is a Victorian school chair. And I just have my microphone here, and so I'm moving. And that's what you hear. You'll hear like a lawnmower outside. And I think what I'd love people to realize is the music that I'm making is literally just, there's no big company behind it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've been through that process with the band, and I'm sure we will again. But for my solo music, it's literally me and one other guy, Alex, and we write songs together and release them. And I think in a world of a lot of and again, nothing wrong with it, but there's a lot of high production, very slick, very corporate manufactured music in the world, which I'm a big fan of. I like that kind of, that we're almost the antithesis of that, where we're kind of just on our own doing this very raw, vulnerable music. So please, please check out my music because I want to make more, but with it all being independent, I rely on myself to promote it.
Support your musicians, support your artists, your creatives. Big proponent of that. And I eagerly look forward to our collaboration as I bring my accordion to your recording studio.
Let's go. Yeah,
Let's do that.
man.
What's the best way for people to reach out to you should they have any more questions for you?
I guess Instagram maybe is probably the platform we use most. I think my username is just James McVey. Um, but just if you, this sounds like such a thing to say, but just put my name into Google and you'll find me on there.
I love it. I love it. Hey, listen, it is what it is. You're famous. Okay. That's just what it is. End of story.
Stop it.
Yeah,
Thanks, man.
no, it's true. Of course, of course. James, did you have fun? And would you consider coming back and doing this all over again in the future?
I would love to. I think, we didn't really we didn't delve into too many actual watches, so which is funny, and I love how that's how it goes. So maybe we can do one down the line, maybe after I've had a few months with my root beer, and we can recap on some watch stuff. But that's
I
brilliant.
love it. Absolutely. Congratulations again. It looks like a beauty. I love
Cheers,
the
dude.
fact that you went with the root beer. It is my wife's favorite GMT version.
Sick.
I think it's cool. She absolutely loves it and adores it. But thank you once again. You've been an absolute joy to speak with. Thank you for spending time with me. I know time is very precious, as we've alluded to and talked about extensively in this podcast, but I really appreciate you. And thank you for coming on board.
All good, man. Anytime. Speak soon.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Timist Podcast Series. Once again, a huge thanks to our incredible guest, James McVey, and of course to all of you for tuning in. Until next time. That concludes this episode of the Timist Podcast Series. A sincere thank you for hanging out with us. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then please push all the buttons that will help you hear more of us in the future. If you'd like to continue the conversation, you can drop a comment in the associated YouTube video or reach out to me on Instagram at TheTimistIG. Thanks for listening. I'm The Timist. Be well, and I'll catch you in the next one.